My parents met in Denver, Colorado. His name was Kenneth John Graves. Her name was Theola Idnit Wish. And I believe that my mother was working as a waitress or server, and my father was working as a shoe salesman. They went out to Los Angeles, California, where his sister and her husband lived, got married, and they lived at 1179 Wilshire Court, Los Angeles, California. And I was born while they were out there in Santa Monica, California. I believe we lived there like 2 or 3 years. I toddled out into a very busy street, and cars were buzzing around me, and my mother just stood there watching. And this lady in this great big limousine saw my mother and the horrible look on her face and my situation, and she stopped the traffic and went over, picked me up, and took me back over to my mother. And then they moved back to Nebraska. They lived, first of all, in Columbus, Nebraska, and then they moved to 1403 South 4th Street in Norfolk, Nebraska. My father loved being a salesman, and there he worked for a company called Pilly's, which distributed milk, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom. We're going to go to the house that I grew up in until I was like about 16 years old. Our house was old when we moved into it, and they have kept it absolutely immaculate. This house here sits on the ground where our great big garden used to be. Let's go around to the back. Oh! Hello! Hi! My name is Roxanne. I used to live here.
Oh, you did?
I grew up in this house.
Oh.
Would you mind if we took a peek?
Yeah, come on.
Oh, we'll clean our feet. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Now I have to really think. Our sink was over there.
There was a porch over here.
Oh, yep. It was a back porch.
A hole in the floor. Here.
Yeah.
We paid like $4,000, I think, for it.
But this here, that's where the bathroom was.
Oh, that's where the
That's always been where the bathroom has been. Oh, absolutely wonderful.
This lady used to live here.
I'm Roxanne, and I grew up here.
You grew up here?
In this house.
Okay.
Well, until I was like about 16 years old, 15, 16. And then we moved up onto Elm Street.
Well, you know, this house was definitely a disaster when I bought it.
You know what? I know, and I'm just going, oh, I could almost, the tears, because it's so beautiful. I mean, you've done a lot of work here. Oh, you are too kind.
Our spare bedroom is our storage room now. He's got
This is stairway.
But you know what you did?
Go up here.
You added on a room.
Garage back there, so I made that into a rec room. That's where my office is.
This was my bedroom.
That's what girl was my daughter's bedroom.
That was my bedroom. Me and my sister. And do you know, for about 5 years, we didn't have any electric lights. We had to use a flashlight to go to bed.
Those are some steep stairs.
And it had a wall, and it had a door. You know, this was a really good neighbor. I will tell you, when I was growing up, the people right here, that house hasn't changed much. Their name was, and was a window peeker. Me and my sister were in the bedroom your daughter was in, and we had to always watch, and he would be peeking in our window. Donna, thank you again for everything. Right up here is the house where we moved to when I was like 17, 18 years old. And when I left here, it was because I was getting married. This little part right here was a little apartment that my mother rented out. My mother was from the Battle Creek area. My father was from the Hamlet area. My grandmother's parents, my great-grandfather, my Grandpa Stoley, and my Grandma Stoley were the wealthiest people. And they lived on a farm just outside of Meadow Grove, Nebraska. And they were the first ones to have electric lights in Madison County. And people used to drive by just to see the electric lights in their home. They always had Cadillac vehicles. And then when the stock market crashed, they lost everything and they were reduced to a farm close to Battle Creek, not as big. The house was not as lovely. This is where my grandma lived, and she was born here, and her twin brother died there and is buried there. When I was growing up, I lived in Norfolk, Nebraska, and my grandparents were a big part of my life. My grandparents I knew very, very well, and my aunt and uncle lived on the farm that my great-grandparents lived on, and then they sold it to my grandparents, my mother's parents, and that's where my mother was born and my mother grew up. This lane was lined with cedar trees. All of this was pasture. We used to walk down to the mailbox and I thought I'd never get back. Back here, there was, and it still is there, the cave. The house that was here when my grandparents were here, they had no indoor plumbing. They did have electricity. And I used to ride horses out here. And one time, my two cousins and I were riding, and the saddle turned because I didn't get it on tight enough and jumped right over that fence over there and hurt its leg. We had to ride bareback from that time on. The pen, that's the same. I bet there's even babies out there. I can still see my uncle walking down to milk cows in this barn. Then when my aunt got married, my aunt and uncle, Ruby and Jean, would farm that property and other property that my grandfather owned. My grandfather owned 6 farms, and I used to ride around to all of them with him. It was very interesting. My uncle hired me to work with him moving irrigation pipe. And I said to him one time, why don't you just get a pivot? And he said, that's the lazy man's way of doing this. So he would take one end, I would take the other end, and we would count 10 rows, and then we'd put it down, and then we'd go back and get the other one. And when the corn got so high that I couldn't lift the irrigation pipe above my head, he took a tong out of a pitchfork and I scooped it up, and we counted our 10 rows and away we went. And we did that every morning and we did that every evening. And I got $3 a day for doing that. My grandfather and grandmother Wish moved off of that farm to an acreage just outside of Battle Creek. When they left the farm over here, they bought another place closer to town. It was an acreage, and they lived right straight across from a park. So that was always a lot of fun for us kids because we watched for cars and head for the park. And on that acreage, they had steers, they had cows that they milked, They had chickens, lots of chickens, because my grandmother sold the roosters for $1, butchered, cleaned, everything. And then one day we decided that we could get out on the roof of the house, and boy, did we have a good time doing that. The problem was, when we got downstairs, my grandfather looked at us and said, "So what are you kids doing on the roof?" And we all looked at him and thought, "Well, how do you know that?" I had 3 siblings. All of us kids went to Washington Elementary School, which was about 4 or 5 blocks from our house. We had to walk to school, and even in the winter when it was very, very cold, we were not allowed to wear slacks. We could wear them to school, but then we had to remove them when we got to school and hang them in the coat closet. And junior high school, and also the high school. And even then, we walked to those schools, and they were both about 3/4 of a mile. This is my high school. It says junior high because they converted it to junior high probably about 30 years ago, and this is where I graduated out of in 1960. It was very interesting because I had 2 dresses. I had 3. I had 1 dress for Sunday, 1 dress for school, and 1 dress to play in. So we always had to change our clothes when we came home from school into our play clothes, which didn't take very long. We could not wait to get our evening meal finished and go back outside again in the summer and play hide and seek. That was the most fun, and I will tell you that I don't know how kids survive today without playing those kinds of games. I belonged to the Girl Scouts. That was the only organization that I belonged to until I got into high school, when I got into a sorority called Tri-Hi-Y. That was a lot of fun, and you had to be asked to be invited. And so there weren't any dues or anything like that, but it was held at the YMCA. Once a week we had meetings, and we had a special song that we sang before every time we met. He, He, and we always adjourned with a prayer. My graduating class was about 200 or 300 kids, and I knew them all. My first job was when I was 12 years old, and I babysat. And I babysat for 6 kids, and I babysat usually on Wednesday night and Saturday night, and I got 50 cents an hour. We also got an allowance because we like to roller skate and go to the movies. So we got a whole another 50-cent piece if we would take care of our chores at home. We would take care of vacuuming, we would take care of dusting, and the one we all hated was washing dishes. That took the longest time, and that cut into our, if we had schoolwork to do, and that also cut into our playtime. When I was in high school, you had to be 14 years old, so I was probably in junior high school, and I car hopped whenever the food drive-ins opened up and a car pulled in. What you would do is go out there and take their order, take it back in, get it filled, take a tray out to their car, and hook the tray on the car. Then when they were finished, they'd honk their horn, and you would go out and get the tray. I also worked at the movie theater. I worked at the very same movie theater that Johnny Carson worked at. I had to wear white blouse, black slacks, and then we would go downstairs where the closet was, and we would get our little jacket, and Johnny Carson had signed his name down there. And I thought that was so cool. I washed dishes in a restaurant Then after I graduated from high school, I moved with another girlfriend of mine to Columbus, Nebraska. And at Columbus, Nebraska, we found a little apartment about 3 to 5 miles from where we worked at Dale Electronics. The second shift, 3 in the afternoon, we walked to work, and then we walked home at 11 o'clock at night. And one night, the policeman there pulled up behind us, and they said, "Where are you girls going?" We said, "We're going home to our apartment." And so anyway, they said, "Can we see your driver's license?" And my friend Helen said, "Why? We're not driving." Well, anyway, so they went on their merry way. We just said we were walking home from work. We only worked there for a summer. We saved up money for college, and we spent that money on our college tuition, which incidentally was $60 a semester. I, at one time, had gone for teaching, and I could tell right away that I was not going to be a teacher. So I even tried bookkeeping. That was not for me either. And then I met my husband, the father of my children. Together we had 5 children. Our marriage did not work out. It ended up in divorce 6 years later. I worked at Sherwood Medical. That was just when I had Patrick and Teresa. And then when I had Brent, I went to work as a server. I got tired of the position, and I went to work at a nursing home. And that's when I became interested in nursing. I went to school for licensed practical nursing. When I finished that, I worked at the Nebraska Veterans Home as weekend supervisor, and that was a fantastic job. But I knew if I was freshly divorced and I needed to take care of my family, I knew that I needed to further my education. So what I did is I applied to several different schools. I really wanted to go to the College of Nursing at the University of Nebraska. And so I applied there and I got accepted. And that was in Omaha, Nebraska. And I said, I really appreciate your offer. But I said, I've got 5 little kids and they are busing kids. And I cannot worry about where my kids are going to school in Omaha. I have to decline.
In 1954, a Supreme Court ruled that segregated schools were unconstitutional. Busing began bringing Black and Latino students to white schools and white students to minority schools. It was very slow to start, and in 1975, Omaha schools received a court order to integrate its schools.
And they said, but we are opening a school in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I said, fantastic. They offered me the position in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I took it. And I felt like a pioneer woman when I picked up my 5 little kids and brought them down to Lincoln, Nebraska. I had left all my support systems. We were all alone. And I studied and studied and studied. And then finally, I graduated from the University of Nebraska College of Nursing. I requested a position, days, swinging to a few evenings a month, 1 or 2 is all. And then what happened is I had to work every weekend.
You went to the Plasma Center. How long did that job last?
Probably about 2 years, because that wasn't for me. That was not my kind of work. I wanted to take care of people. I went to Eastmont Tower after I left the Plasma Center, and I was in charge of the clinic for 27 years. And I loved my job and I loved the people. It was fantastic.
How are you doing?
I'm great.
my gosh, Roxanne. How are you?
If I called a doctor and he was a little grumpy, I would just say to him in a very nice way, Dr. So-and-so, call me back when you're in a better mood, and I'd hang up the phone.
Did it work?
Yes, it did. I met Glenn through another person that I knew who also lived in Norfolk, Nebraska, who was a licensed practical nurse, and she had taken a position down here in Lincoln, unbeknownst to me, at Bryan Hospital. And so anyway, she and I got more acquainted here, and she was telling me about this individual that she thought was a very nice person, and she introduced me to him, and I thought, what a dork. But I thought, whatever, that's not my problem, that's hers. And so anyway, she and he quit going together. We would go out with a bunch of other people, and we were exposed to each other, and we became very good friends for probably about a year. And then we started dating about a year afterwards. We kind of slipped into our relationship very, very easily. We would see each other from time to time, and then he asked me out one time, and that started our romance. He used to help me study. That's when we became friends, because he would ask me questions, and he was just very helpful in that way. We fell in love with each other, and we were walking down O Street after a ball game one day. We walked into this one jewelry store, and I thought, what's he doing in here? And looked around, and he said to the proprietor, can I see that ring right there? And the guy pulled it out, and he put it on my finger.
Were you surprised?
Yes, I was surprised, very surprised. And I just knew that I loved him. I was in love with him, and I knew he was in love with me, and I just knew that we belonged together. And that is how Glenn and I became engaged. And I said to him, I have 5 kids. I want us to live together for 6 months. If at the end of 6 months it doesn't work, you go your way and I'll go my way. Well, at the end of 3 months, we got married. There's not that much to planning a wedding. I just cooked all the food, and we sent out the invitations. And if we didn't send the invitation to the person we wanted to, we would just call them up and told them, this is what we're doing on this day. We called our family. I asked my sister if she would stand up with me, and he asked his best friend. And my brother flew in and married us. And we got married in a blizzard. But everybody had made it to the wedding except for his parents, who didn't come until the day we were getting married. And that's the day the blizzard hit, 7 o'clock in the morning. We did not get to have a wedding night that night because we couldn't get out of town, number one. And number two, we had a whole house full of friends and family. We bought a house together. It was 4 bedrooms, or whatever, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. The kind of enjoyment that we had was going camping. When we had the kids, we had a tent, and we swam, and we fished, and we did a lot of boating. I loved that too. That was our entertainment. We had already started going to Arizona because my parents owned a construction company, and they would go down there in the winter. When all of our kids left home, We retired and we bought a home down there in a resort. So we go in the winter and avoid all the cold air. As far as I'm concerned, a 3-day cruise makes me feel like I have been gone for a whole week. I think Glenn has said we've been on 16 cruises. My favorite one was the one that we took back east. We went up through the eastern states. We toured New York, and I had already been there with my dance team, but it was an amazing experience. Alaska would come in second. All of the cities were just like going back in time. Seeing the icebergs and watching the calving of the ice, the salmon jumping, the whales, that was a wonderful, wonderful trip too. I am a true believer in the fact where you have to go through this and this and this to get to this.